Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the program, at least the pre-program. This is not the program yet. We're just getting cranked up to make sure everything's running the way it should. The pre-show. 3 minutes of nothing, and maybe a little bliss if you want some. So, how is everybody tonight? Welcome. Happy Monday. So what's going on? Look at this. I need my glasses for this. What the heck? Hey, Steph. Hey, Kelly. Good to see you. Kelly Bell. Good to have you here. Thought I'd take a break from Egyptology and the Exodus and Egyptian history and do a little psychology of the heart kind of stuff for tonight. So 9:01, we got 2 minutes before we go live over on the radio station, OdysseyRadio.com, ODYSY radio.com. I just dig myself deeper into stupid things, says Steph. Hey, that's what we're all good at. We dig ourselves into stuff. And then the fun part is seeing how we get out of it. Now, I can handle almost everything. I can handle emotional stuff, crises, blah, 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 this, that, the other thing. I don't like financial messes. Finances is different. You can't pay the bills. You can't do this. You can't do that. That sucks. That's sucky stuff. Even the sucky stuff, though, that's emotional is sucky stuff. But you can work through those. Financial is sometimes like you got to rob a bank to fix your problems. Randall Flagg, good to see you. Nice to have you in here. See, I just took off my glasses. My eyes are just so blurry. Some days they're just fine. Other days they're blurry. I think that's what the eye surgery will take care of by the end of the month. The 29th, leap day, I have my eye surgery. So I hate being an emotional schlub, says Steph. Do you consider yourself a schlub? Or do you mean you are an emotional schlub, or you feel like you're an emotional schlub because of what's happening? That's a good question. Okay, we got about 20 seconds and we go live. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go dark, as is our custom. Sit tight. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
The Intrepid Radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent talk.
Hey folks, welcome to the program. I'm your host, Scotty Roberts. This is my show, the Intrepid Radio program, right here on Odyssey Radio. That's ODYSY radio.com. For those of you who've never been there, listen to the show only on YouTube or Facebook or Patreon or some of the other places where we have our show. If you're over on the radio station where there is no video simulcast, you can come on over to my YouTube channel, watch the video. You can listen or join in with the chat room and chat about the show as well. And I'm going to tell you, if you're not on YouTube and you're chatting, like leaving a comment over on the Facebook page or something like that, nobody in the chat room is going to see it. And you won't be able to see anybody else's chats. You got to be over in the YouTube chat room. So if you want to join a good chat, come on over to YouTube and join the rest of the Intrepids that are over there chatting up a storm already. And for those of you here, I've got to put on my glasses. And those of you who aren't in here, JP is here. The party can get started, as he said. So, hey, JP, identify that plane in the graphic. I dare you to. Tonight's graphic has a plane in the sky in the background. I don't think it's a real plane, but it's just an artist's conception of a plane. But to see if that looks like anything that you're familiar with. And that's part of what he does. He knows things. So, welcome everybody. I'm glad that you're here. I see Steph. I see JP. I see Randall. Uh, oh, it isn't. LOL. He says it's not a real plane. Yeah. Note the propellers if you haven't already. So that's an AI version of a plane. And I didn't even ask for a plane in that graphic. I use AI to do a lot of the show graphics. But hey, Kalina, good to see you over in the chat room. And so when I do those AI prompts, I just said dying of a broken heart, and this is what it gave me. So there it is. And so that's kind of the topic tonight. I need to ask y'all. Now, since you're all here and you're all alive, I'm assuming if you've ever had a broken heart, it hasn't killed you. So the question really is, it's more rhetorical, but is there a psychological side to that? Can a broken heart kill you? And I'm leading up to the broken heart part by wanting to talk a little bit about this quiet quitting in a relationship. You can do it in a friendship, you can do it in a job, you can do it in a romantic relationship. And I thought that this would be a nice break from being all Egyptological and historical. And we'll get back into that because I got a lot more to talk about with the Exodus and the dating of the Exodus. That's an old topic here. Obviously, it was the topic of one of my books, the one that I co-authored with John Ward. We had two versions of who we thought the Pharaoh of the Exodus was, only separated by about 80 years. Where some of the trains of thought out there in the scholarly world want to separate them by 200 years. And there's just so many things that don't fit the dating system of the later date, which is Ramses II, which is Yul Brynner and Charlton and Moses. You know, that's so it shall be written, so it shall be done. That Ramses II, Ramses the Great. He was not the Pharaoh of the Exodus, by the way. It happened almost 200 years earlier. And I can prove it. Ramses is not the Pharaoh of the Exodus. Prove me wrong. I want to set up a table and have that in hieroglyphs as my sign. So, JP says of the plane in the graphic, it almost has a remnants, various World War II era aircraft, possibly some post WW2, and it has wonky engine numbers and placement. Yeah, it does. It's just a wonky, AI ain't all that it's cracked up to be, is what I'm saying. I've tried to get planes before. I tried to get a Corsair once. I went Corsair, all these different kind of props over and over and over again. Could never, they could never make it look right. Corsair happens to be my favorite World War II plane. And I think I can blame that on Robert Conrad as Pappy Boyington and the Black Sheep Squadron. Baba Black Sheep. If anybody is old enough to remember that series, you remember Robert Conrad? Robert Conrad played James West, government agent. Wild, Wild West, set in a Western with his sidekick, Artemis Gordon. And they got into all these wild, crazy... as the show started, it wasn't so wild. Got a little campier as it went on, but Robert Conrad was kind of your man's man, playing government agent James West. The role was reprised in blackface by Will Smith 20 years ago now. I liked the movie. It was okay as a standalone movie. I had a problem, not because he's black, but because James West was white. It's not that the actor was black, it's that the character wasn't black. And he had a history. So, we are poor little lambs who have lost our way. Ba, ba, ba. Yeah, see, Jason, I remember the theme song too. Dun, 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 dun. Now, I don't know why I remember that, but I do. So there it is. That was from Black Sheep Squadron. I think it was called Baba Black Sheep, or it went by two names. The series premiere or the movie, I think, was was Baba Black Sheep, and the series was Black Sheep Squadron, or the other way around. I don't remember. That was a good series. I liked it. It was on when I was in high school in the 70s. After the Wild Wild, James Conrad was done with the Wild Wild West. Hey, Sarah Yusuf, welcome. That's kind of like when William Shatner was done with Star Trek. You didn't see him in much right away, but then in the early to mid 70s, you saw him in lots of small roles, but then he got that role in, what was it, Barbary Coast. Does anybody remember that show? That was Shatner and Doug McClure. As I don't know if they were brothers or just partners running if I'm not mistaken, a gambling establishment in old San Francisco. Oh yeah, he did T.J. Hooker after that, of course. We all know that. And then, of course, he was Denny Crane in Boston Legal more recently. So, but Robert Conrad, rest his soul, he passed away. Wow, 15 years ago, maybe. But one of his last bigger roles, he did a mini series where he played G. Gordon Liddy. Do you remember that one? Anybody? Robert Conrad. Look him up if you don't know who he is. Great television actor. Oh, The Shit My Dad Says. Yep, Shatner was in that too. I never saw that. I remember seeing that was a Twitter account, wasn't it? Some guy, and then they made it into a TV series. Hey, Barbie D, good to see you. So, anyway, enough nostalgia for the evening as breaking the ice for us. Wasn't he in SWAT? Who? Robert Conrad? I don't know. Was he? Book was hilarious. Book. Which series was that? Why am I know who you're talking about, JP, but I can't place it. Yeah, he did the battery commercial. Go ahead, knock it out of my hand, or something like that. Robert Conrad, epitome of the real man's tough guy. And he was kind of a little guy. He was a good-looking 60s actor, made it into the 70s, a little bit into the 80s. Yeah, he was the Wild Wild West, Barbie D. And if any of you saw Will Smith's reprise of the Wild Wild West, I can't remember who played Artemis Gordon in that. It was Kevin Kline played Artemis Gordon, and they even had famous Shakespearean actor playing the bad guy in that. Kevin, his name's slipping my mind for some reason. He's been in all like Henry V. He was in the Harry Potter movies. He was one of the teachers in Harry Potter, one of the Harry Potter movies. What else was he in? That you've seen so much of him. Did a lot of Shakespearean films. Kevin, maybe it's not Kevin. I can't think. It'll come to me. Anyway. That's what I normally use the mute button for, but I thought I'd share that one with you. Greg Pappy Boynton was way bigger than him. Yeah, I think they were on a nighttime talk show together one time. I never met Pappy Boynton, but when I was a youth pastor, we had a bunch of churches that got together. We did a big youth thing, and we had one of the guys that was on the original, the real life Black Sheep Squadron. He was an old guy. He came in. This would have been in what year was it? It was in the early 90s. It was 90 or 91. So this would be like 45 years after the war. And but he had been. Thank you, Barbie D, and Randall Flagg. Yeah, he was one of the original Black Sheep Squadron dudes. He was in his late 70s, I believe. But he said he was the guy that told me. I may have told you this story once before, where he said there was something where they were running down the beach, and he took a header and sank his face into the white sand with great force. And he said it wasn't sand, it was coral. All that white sand down there, he says, was coral reefs. It was all broken up and powderized onto the white sand beaches. And he said for 40 years, he says, even as late as, he says, a month ago, I thought I have a pimple. What do I got a pimple at 76 years old for? And he pops it and a piece of white coral sand comes out. He said, so, he said he did a good face plant, and the rest of his life was picking white coral sand out of his skin. So Lloyd Bridges was in Sea Hunt. That's true, Professor Bauer. And thank you, Steph, by the way. Thank you, one and all, for those blessings on me. Lloyd Bridges was actually supposed to be Captain Kirk, or at least Captain Pike. I don't know which one they were looking at him for. There were several actors out of the 60s that had those shows. Sea Hunt with Lloyd Bridges. You had Hawaii Five-0 with, Garrett? Jack Lord played him. So Jack Lord and Lloyd Bridges both were asked to play the captain on Star Trek. And they both turned it down. Lloyd Bridges turned it down because he said he didn't want to be typecast in a science fiction role. And Jack Lord, I think, turned it down for some similar types of reasons. He thought it wouldn't go anywhere and it would hurt his career. So there you go. They ended up with William Shatner eventually. So there it is. Not after Airplane. That's right. Yeah, he was pretty typecast as a goofy actor after that, but he was a very serious actor in his young days, and he was pretty manly looking dude in the 60s. So and of course Sea Hunt did that for him. So anyway, tonight let's move again. Let's move off the nostalgia, TV nostalgia. We'll pick it up in the captain's cabin if we'd like to. But tonight I wanted to ask you a couple of questions about some things. Can a broken heart kill you? Now, that's not really the way I asked the question. I was asking, can you die of a broken heart? And I'm really not going for that as really the main gist of what I was hitting tonight, but that is a spin-off from quiet quitting in relationships. And the thing about quiet quitting that I wanted to ask is, have any of you been in a relationship where the other person was somebody who quit the relationship but didn't leave the relationship? They just quit the relationship. And they quit it, but not even right away. Have any of you experienced that with anybody? Have you felt that from anybody? Have you had a broken heart? And guys, women will always talk about broken hearts. Guys aren't like, yeah, I had a broken heart, guys. Guys are like, whatever, come on, let's go bowling or whatever. And so guys don't talk that way as much. Oh, Chuck Thurston said Lloyd Bridges was offered the role of Captain Kirk. That's what I thought I had heard too. Good to see you, Chuck. Haven't seen you for a long time. So, have any of you faced that in a relationship? Is the question I want to ask. Has it ever led you to a place where this quiet quitting was something you've experienced? Maybe something that has torn you apart? The roughest thing to hear as a guy is that she just wants to be friends, says Chuck Thurston. Ain't you right about that? Oh, you're a great guy, and you'll make some girl an awesome husband someday, or an awesome boyfriend. But can we just be friends? I just want to be. You are such a good friend. I couldn't see us ever together married, but man, I would never want to lose you as a friend. Just take and shove the stake right through my heart, please, lady. I've been there, and I think a lot of us have been in those similar situations. So rather than go into Egyptology and history tonight, I wanted to hit this a little bit because I thought it was interesting. I read some articles on it, just because I read all these kinds of articles. Not that I read articles about broken hearts, but I read a lot of psychological stuff. And so quiet quitting is the first thing that caught my eye. Quiet quitting happens in marriages and relationships. And I've got some signs for you that a partner is quiet quitting. and then 3 ways that you can address the issue. And so, as we talk about this tonight, I'm going to ask you: have you ever had this happen? Kalina says yes, if that's what you're saying yes to. Leslie Nielsen, yes. Randall Flagg. Let's see what else. Who else is in? Quiet quitting is deciding to stop putting energy and effort into a relationship. That's very true. And it's the practice of doing the minimum to hold on to a job, to hold on to a friendship, or in this case, a marriage. And I couldn't say a friendship literally. Friends don't do that. You could almost say not really in a marriage, but marriage is also a legal binding, so it can happen there. A quietly quitting partner may look for excuses to avoid intimacy, to avoid lovemaking. This is what quiet quitters do. Every excuse in the book for intimacy. Have you experienced that? Quiet quitters might fantasize about being single again, although they make no effort to leave the relationship. So they're quiet quitters. They don't really want to end the relationship. Sometimes they might say they want to end the relationship, but they don't. They just quit on every other front. So a lot's been written about quiet quitting. A lot's been written about quiet quitting a job. But there's also signs that a person is quiet quitting their marriage or a long-term relationship. Decades ago, before the trendy term had been developed, Neil Diamond and Barbra Streisand provided a dead-on description of quiet quitting in their duet, "You Don't Bring Me Flowers Anymore." Anybody remember that song? You old enough to remember that? My mom was a big Streisand and a big Neil Diamond fan, so she was always playing that music. And the lyrics describe a relationship in which partners just quit trying. You don't bring me flowers. You don't sing me love songs. You hardly talk to me anymore when you come to the door at the end of the day. And then it says, I remember when, you used to say you love me, couldn't wait, used to hate to leave me. Now, and so on and so on and so on. You know that. It was an amazing song. It came out in the 70s, early 80s, 70s. But that's what quiet quitting is. Quiet quitting describes this practice of doing the minimum you can do and still managing to hold on to a job, or in this case, a marriage. And if you're the spouse who's still invested in the relationship, or the one in the relationship that's still invested in it, it can be dismaying to see your partner seem to evaporate into thin air over time. They may still be showing up physically, but you feel that they're as ephemeral as a ghost in terms of the substance they bring to the marriage. And there's 4 aspects of the relationship that might offer clues that you're married to a quietly quitting spouse. Excuse me, or that you're in a relationship with a quietly quitting person. Water, wet my whistle. So there's 4 aspects. That's the wood floor above my head. It looks so cool up there since we put the wood floor in without the carpet. But man, a kid drops a crayon on the floor, goes ba-bam, ba-bam, bam, ba-bam, bam, bam, as it bounces along the floor. And I'm like, what the hell is going on up there? And we've got the soundproof padding in there too. So it's crazy. Anyway, so I'm going to go through these 4 things that offer you clues about your spouse or your partner quietly quitting, or maybe they will describe you if you're the one quietly quitting. Chuck Thurston said, we went through a program called Marriage Encounter. I know that program, by the way. They called this relation state as married single. The only way out is communication. I agree with you, Chuck. I know the Marriage Encounter experience. believe, if I'm not mistaken, and I hope I'm not mixing it up with something else, there was a church in our community that was Grace Church, and we were in a Baptist church, 30 years ago, 35 years ago. And the Grace Church offered that program, Marriage Encounter, if I'm not mistaken. Or it was something like it. So, but I'm very familiar with what the program is. That was I was doing Promise Keepers, helping leading guys in our church in Promise Keepers. When that came out after that, or maybe it was about the same time that they all came out. So, number one, here is what is of the four aspects of the relationship that identifies a quiet quitter. Number one, simply doing the minimum. Quiet quitting is all about putting out the least possible energy and doing as little as possible to get by. This could look different for people who have kids and people who don't have kids. They've got different energies that have to go on there. You want to spend as little time as possible with your partner, doing only things on the required list. You find yourself making plans to do things on your own. You may even make excuses to say, well, that's where I get all my energy is from my friends doing this thing. You make plans to do things on your own. You find that you're not worried about leaving your partner quiet on their own. Matter of fact, you can leave and they don't even realize you've left the house. So quiet quitters often feel that there's little hope that their relationship can be rekindled. And this sense of futility keeps them from vocalizing their opinions or their needs. So you see, I'm not really merely painting the quiet quitter as the bad guy. They're the ones doing the quiet quitting, but maybe they've got their reasons. Maybe they have this feeling of futility that they'll ever be able to do anything good with their relationship again. Number two, heart versus head. And the intellectual kind of head is what I'm talking about, for all of you with dirty minds like mine. Heart versus head. When you're in love, your heart and your mind are both hyper-focused on your partner, aren't they? Do you remember those days? You were hyper-focused on your partner. The whole world revolved around them. I looked today, my daughters, I was talking to my older daughters, and the topic of some old pictures came up that they found. And I said, I've got a whole slew of photos of you guys from 20 years ago and younger, obviously. And and we had this program called Photo Booth on our computer. And you could take pictures and selfies. This was all 20 years ago this stuff came out. And so I went through some old files I found. And I've got a bunch of these old libraries of Photoshop, or not Photoshop, Photo Booth. And I open up those old libraries, and it's got my kids, doing picture after picture after picture after picture in their mid-teenage years, 13 to 15, and taking all kinds of pictures of themselves with their girlfriends and all of that stuff. And I said, I got a ton of that. And I went through that whole file of about 1,000 or more pictures. And as I'm scanning through, I keep grabbing all the ones with the girls, and the next 20 pictures, slide them over into a folder for them. But sparsed in between were pictures of Rainey and I doing the same thing, selfies on the camera, smooch. I got this whole series where she's behind me, she comes up, smooches me on the neck, then on the cheek, then the lips, and then, and the things going, just taking pictures. So it's kind of fun to have. But I look at those and I go, when you're in love, there's nothing that keeps you away from the other person. Nothing. It could take, as I've said many times, when you love somebody, it takes a team of wild horses to keep you apart. Figuratively speaking, of course. You're hyper-focused on the other partner. But if you're quiet quitting your relationship, when you think about your partner, your heart doesn't respond. The relationship feels like, and you treat it like, an obligation. Yeah, I get the wife. I should go up and make coffee because I've done that every day for the last 20 years, or 10 years, or 3 years, whatever we're talking about here. Feels obligatory, your relationship. Not only does the heart seem to shut down against the partner, but guess what? The body does too. A quiet quitting partner might look for excuses to avoid intimacy, especially lovemaking part of intimacy. Intimacy isn't just getting naked and making love. Intimacy can be holding somebody's hand. It can be you're both in the kitchen and you walk up behind the other partner and you give them a hug from behind, even though they're cutting onions. Those are the things you do. But the quiet quitting person finds reasons to not do that. There's always a reason. There's always a reason to not. Now, couples, don't get me wrong. Couples can go through phases where one or the other isn't that hyped up about having sex for the ultimate and intimate physical intimacy. That's not always a problem. There just might be some things that need to be worked out. There might be a stage you're going through. There might be whatever. But when this drags on and on all levels of intimacy, you can start to wonder if the other person is quietly quitting, moving out, moving away from the relationship. They find reasons to avoid the daily goodbye kiss. Hey, see ya, honey. Have a good day. Sometimes they don't even say goodbye. They're just, whoa, where'd you go? You end up texting them. Did you leave already? Yep, the car's gone. So they find ways to avoid the goodbye kiss. That's before work I'm talking, not the goodbye. So if they try to hold your hand, you might suddenly feel the urge to brush back your hair, adjust your glasses, cross your arms, whatever you can do to avoid that contact. Is loving a sapling a thing now? You talking about a baby tree, Steph, over there? Or you talking about wood? Pardon the pun. Oh my God, yep, Charlie Pride. Now I still play all those Randall, such great songs. Okay. So detachment, Sarah Yusuf says. It's a process of detaching. Number 3, partnership in the business sense of the word is all that takes place. Your perspective on the marriage, your connection to your partner, it shifts from happily ever after or love match to something more like a business relationship with a contract with a contract that's hard to break. It's a business relationship. You can't really get out of the contract easily, so you go along with it. But a quiet quitter may begin to imagine what it could feel like to break that contract. They might think about what living single would be like if they don't have kids. Sometimes a quiet quitter doesn't want to go to the breaking of the contract stage because they're comfortable with the kids being around with 2 parents in the house. But that might not have anything to do with the relationship between the 2 parents. They fantasize about a new life that doesn't include their partner, though. You can bet that for sure. I could have been someone. I could have done something. And I think that's one of the strongest draws for people who are finding ways to release the intimacy in their relationship and walk away from it, is that they've given up on it. They don't want to try that anymore. My relationship isn't what I wanted it to be. I'm not where I want to be in life. The hero I married turned out to be a zero and didn't get me where I thought we would go or follow me in the footsteps I thought that he should. Didn't lead me on the path that I thought we were going to go on or that I was promised we'd be on. So, I'm done with this, however many years you put into it. Or I'm done with this before I'm too old to do anything else. Trying to think of all the things I've heard on these things. Listen, you're never too old to crave a loving partner. You're never too old to crave intimacy. You might be too old to go out and find what you thought you could have gotten 20 or 30 years ago, but you're not too old to crave it. What you can end up with is probably very different than what you might think you want to get. Chuck Thurston says, no kids, but we got a never needy dog that thinks he owns her and I'm just allowed access. There it is. I get that. Chuck Thurston needs more wood. Commenting on the prof. I don't even see the prof. Where is he? Way back there? Sapiosexual is where it's at. So you're into sapios? Who here's a sapien? Anyway, so that's number 3. Number 4, that shows that somebody is a quiet quitter, is apathy or a lack of care or concern. The opposite of love is not hate, it's apathy. It's not caring. I once, I don't know who I heard this from, but I heard it a very long time ago. When partners are having problems, the one that shows they care the less thinks they have the most power, and generally does. The emotional power in a relationship ends up with the person who shows that they care the least. Sapiosexuals are more focused on the actual mental person, says JP, person-to-person connection, than the physical drives. Centers very much around the intellect. Yeah, Steph was saying sap. I get it. Over in the chat room, folks, if you're not in there. It's a good conversation going on over there. If you're not in the chat room, come on over and hop in. So I've noticed we've only got about half the people in the chat room that we normally have. Maybe this is a topic that people like to avoid, or they don't. They want the meaty, ghosty, cryptid, historical, archaeological mystery types of shows, but don't like this. I think this is good for all of us to go through this kind of stuff. Think about these. This is energy we all experience in one form or another. Let's see. So the opposite of love isn't hate, it's apathy. It's not caring. So paradoxically, you might find yourself arguing or disagreeing less than you used to. Conflict takes energy. And you don't feel that the relationship is worth the investment of time or energy. You take care of your own needs and figure that your spouse can look after themselves. You know where I've seen this manifest? I've seen this manifest in partners that will say, he just leaves the room when I talk. Lays something on me, and when I try to answer, he leaves the room. There's no communication. No desire to listen to what I have to say. He wants his own bedroom. How many of you married somebody from the opposite sex because you wanted to be their roommate and share a house together, but not a bed or a room? I realize we've talked about this before, but there are some people who prefer not to share rooms together. The closer they're together in proximity in a bed, the closer they are to having to be intimate at times. They want to avoid that. It's okay, Kalena, you go ahead and multitask. I'm doing the same thing. I'm sitting here growing old and I'm doing radio. So that's a multitask. So you notice they no longer are doing the little things for you that they once did. They've lost interest in spirited discussions or hashing out differences. Maybe they become very critical of you. And the only thing that they're interested in is what makes them happy. And therefore, everything you do is a thing worth criticizing. And that's the only energy they'll put into the relationship. But they don't want to put too much of that in. They have to put the checks and balances on because they don't really want to end the relationship. They just want it to be a thing for themselves. And they don't want it to be involved with you or vice versa. Maybe you do that to somebody. Randall Flagg says, quote, "Because I remember all the times I tried so hard and you laughed in my face because you held the cards. I don't care anymore." Oh, that's a song? There you go. Probably a song I've heard, but one I'm not recognizing just by the lyrics. Yeah, that happens all the time. So here's a quiet quitting assessment. All right. Galanis in 2023 developed an assessment to measure quiet quitting among employees. And 3 factors were identified that reflected the essence of the phenomenon: detachment, lack of initiation or initiative, and lack of motivation. Those 3 things: detachment, initiative, motivation. So these reflect the behaviors that relationship quiet quitters exhibit as their emotional investment in the relationship dwindles. They have detachment from the other person. They lack any sort of initiative to make it better, and they have no motivation to make the relationship a good one. So the relationship dwindles while their sense of obligation persists. So being able to assess it accurately doesn't automatically lead to solutions in the workplace. And finding solutions for relationships can be way more difficult than, because you can go at a job, you can just go, I'm going to go somewhere else. I'm going to go find another job. So what do relationship quiet quitters really want? What do they want? Research suggests that employees quiet quit due to burnout, lack of opportunity for growth, lack of opportunity for development, poor leadership, insufficient recognition for their work, and these causes are likely parallel to the reasons spouses quiet quit their marriages. So if you find yourself or your partner quietly quitting the relationship, it's probably time to address your concerns. Understanding your partner's needs is as important as understanding your own needs in a relationship, if it's to endure, survive. So in responding to quiet quitting in the business world, leaders are encouraged to shift the culture in ways that show their commitment to their employees. And they're encouraged to find ways to show their employees the value that they have to the organization's success and demonstrate how each person's role is important in the larger organization. Now, respecting boundaries is also important, as having unrealistic expectations of employees can result in a burnout and lead to quiet quitting. We know what quiet quitting looks like in a company. And sometimes you have other people that you share that with. So applying these suggestions to a marriage may positively affect a relationship's vitality. How? 1, partners are encouraged to take time to show how they value their partner. And now it's going to do one of 2 things. It's going to strengthen the relationship and bolster communication, or it's going to end it. Because the other person's going to go, I'm not going to do any of that. So Acknowledging your partner, expressing appreciation to them for being in your life can help heal relationship fissures, and it can help maintain a currently healthy relationship. 2, explicitly share with your partner their importance in your life, your family's life, the relationship. Let them know the ways that they make your life easier or better. Compliment them on their strengths. Offer words of support when they face challenges. Treat them as the important person they are in your life. But then you ask, well, what happens if that doesn't work? What that's really, they just don't care. Stop complimenting me. Stop building me up. Stop. I know what you're doing. You're trying to draw me back into the relationship. What if they don't want to go there? That's the question. Number 3, examine your own expectations of the relationship and the partner. Do a reality check and see if your expectations are unrealistic, unreasonable, and unfairly unilateral. Remind yourself that you can't expect one person to fulfill all of your needs, nor should you. And your partner shouldn't be expected to carry more than a fair share of the relationship and its obligations on their own. So quiet quitting a long-term relationship is not a new phenomenon. It's gone on for as long as mankind's been married. But the wisdom gained from research into the corporate version of quiet quitting might just provide transferable strategies for revitalizing a relationship culture, strengthening relationship engagement. These are all things we can work on. They're things we can look at. And they're things we have to wonder, where is my relationship? Is it in this position? Now, so what happens when things break up? What if the quiet quitting becomes the vociferous quitting, the vocal quitting, the spoken quitting, the enacted upon quitting? They don't want to go there? Just send them naughty pics. Hey, there's an idea. Everybody. Sometimes I think my cat quiet quits me. So you're going to send pictures to your cat? I realize he's a cat. Cats are assholes, but I still love him, says Steph. There you go. JP says, Sigh, I've been there. Oof, duh. Yeah, I know. I feel that pain, JP. So let's say it goes to the inevitable end and there's a breakup. I'm shifting gears just a little bit here because I want to talk about this whole thing of, can a broken heart actually kill you? Can severe emotional or psychological distress cause broken heart syndrome? Can that lead to bad health? Can that lead to death? Well, I think we can all, without thinking too deeply, go, well, yeah, I guess it could, depending on what you do and how you act. What kind of handle do you have on your own emotions? So broken heart syndrome is a medical condition that can mimic a heart attack. It can even be fatal in rare occasions. Women are more likely to experience this disorder, but it's more likely to be fatal for men. There's triggers that include romantic breakups, betrayal by partners or friends, emotional traumas. I remember, and I don't like bringing this up. It's not to shame her. So many years have gone by. My first wife, Suzanne, had an affair, and it's the first I had ever had to deal with that thing up close and present. I think I was in the seminary at the time, or I was just out of seminary, but she'd had an affair, and bless her heart now, that's so many years ago, it almost doesn't matter. That was, God, 35 to 40 years ago, 35 years ago. But she's a wonderful person. I love her to death now, and she's a good friend, and she's a good friend to Rainey. But I remember when I learned about that, I was 25 years old. I'm 63 now. Gives you an idea how long ago. And I first heard about that, and I was still young married, young in love. didn't realize we were even in relationship trouble because of the setting we were in. And but I remember when I learned about that, my chest just shook. I wasn't crying. I was just shaken. I was shaken to my core. Can it be fatal for men to be heartbroken? Sure it can. Emotional trauma can do that to us. Research has shown that emotional distress triggers the release of stress hormones like catecholamines. So whether it was a breakup or a deep romantic relationship, betrayal by a person you believed to be a good friend, or unpredictable, traumatic experiences that rock the ground underneath you, everyone has experienced that sick, sinking feeling of the broken heart that can be triggered. And if you've felt it once before, sometimes it's not as bad the next time around. It still hurts, but it's not as earth-shattering as that first time you'd ever experienced something like that. As Sarah Yusuf says, yes, short answer, show's over. LOL, Sarah, says Steph over in the chat room. So, emotional and psychological distress that results from these types of experiences can be equaled by physiological distress and actual damage to your mind and to your heart, to your body. We all know how connected emotions can be to our physical responses. Heartache and physical pain. When we experience distress psychologically or emotionally, it triggers the same part of the brain that responds to physical harm with physical pain. Emotional pain is felt physically. Heartbreak causes physical pain. Depending on the person being sick at heart, can be coupled with digestive upsets such as stomach aches, nausea, stress, no sleeping. It can affect cognitive processes, leads to memory problems, difficulty expressing oneself verbally. It can affect the respiratory system, leave us struggling to catch our breath or hold our breath. The nervous system can be affected, leaving us weak in our knees, numb, feeling like we could be knocked over by a feather. Men and women respond differently. As a guy, I could say, I can understand. Remember the old John Cusack movie where he stood out on the lawn with the boombox over his head? That's what guys do. We go a little nutty and we do the things. We don't get together with our guy friends and go, oh, I got to cry on your shoulder. We don't do that because we're guys. But we do it in other ways. We get stupid in other ways. And it affects our bodies. It affects our minds. Women in a different way. The circulatory system can be affected. Our blood pressure can rise. Our heart can pound. In some severe cases, our heart might literally break. Jason says in the chat room, some studies suggest that men actually experience more pain during breakups and relationship failures. That they experience more pain. Yeah, I think they do. Unless they're the dick that's ending it because they're running off with the secretary or doing whatever. The pain comes later. But yeah, when you are at the receiving end of the breakup, yeah, that can be pretty tough. Broken heart syndrome, which is known in the medical field as Takotsubo, Takot, Takotsubo, S-U-B-O, cardiomyopathy, Takotsubo cardiomyopathy, or stress cardiomyopathy, is a real thing. It's real. Stress cardiomyopathy is a genuine physiological response to multiple forms of trauma, including heartbreak, loss of a loved one, other significant stressors. In some rare cases, a broken heart can be fatal. So people, you might say, well, that person's just too invested. They don't know how to get over it, move on, and get on with their life. Well, that could be part of it. But there's also the pain that's caused by the initial breakup that we don't have control over. We haven't gotten to that place where you want to figure your way out of the haze yet. You can die of that. People experiencing broken heart syndrome or stress cardiomyopathy may have the same symptoms of an actual heart attack, including the crushing chest pain that we associate with heart attacks. Still, the person's arteries look normal, not obstructed. It's the emotional kicking in that causes the physical damage. And there's two forms of this Takotsubo cardiomyopathy. Say that all fast 4 times. It's caused by emotional distress. The secondary form is caused by a physical injury or stressor, such as major trauma or some underlying illness. And not surprisingly, the primary type has a much better prognosis than the secondary type. It's believed that the initial stress can trigger an overproduction of catecholamines. Sorry, I don't use these words very often, which affect the heart. However, the ebbing and flowing of high emotions can regulate the catecholamine levels in the body, in the catecholamine levels in the body. In the second form, the accompanying physical illness may not allow for decreased levels of the illness until the illness is healed. So, boom. Guys, we got about 1.5 minutes left on the radio. But there's more to go through with this. Talking about what helps us heal, make space for mindfulness in your life. Awareness, appreciation of the present moment. Eat a healthy diet. Spend your time with the people that accept and love you for who you are. When we experience romantic rejection, the key is to fill that new gap in our emotional landscape with supportive friends, not to ricochet right back into another romantic relationship, which will more than likely fail miserably because it's rebounding, as they say. Self-pity isn't a good look on anyone, so don't waste too much time allowing yourself to pity yourself. And don't waste a moment entertaining thoughts with revenge. That's only going to hurt you more than it hurts them. Radio audience, we got to leave you. Come on over to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Scotty Roberts, and join the chat room over there for the Captain's Cabin. Live long and prosper.
The Intrepid Radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent talk.
Hey folks, this is Scotty Roberts, and this is the Intrepid Radio broadcast. I've been broadcasting for about 20 years now, covering such topics as science, politics, the paranormal, weird science, weird world history, archaeology, and the paranormal. Everything from ghosts to cryptids to creepy things that go bump in the night. So every week I bring you 3 new episodes. Come and join my channel and also be a patron to this site. So see the details below, and we'll see you here. Dave, I love you, brother.
I miss you too.
I miss you too, I heard.
Yep.
Did you guys hear that?
I heard that.
I miss you, Dave. Well, welcome to the Captain's Cabin, everyone. Glad that you're here with us, spending a little time in the afterglow of the show, such as it is. And so, how do all of you think about what we talked about tonight? Any of you in a relationship that is like that, where you've experienced that, or where you're the one perhaps making somebody else experience that? It's not a proud thing to admit, but it's an okay thing to admit, because we're all human and we all do stuff. Maybe there's reasons we have that we act that way. So you have to ask yourself, is this something that I do, or something that's been done to me? You let me know. You can call and talk about it if you want. So those of you who are here, I think we have more people here now than we had actually during the show. So welcome everybody who's straggled in listening to the show and are in the chat room. Good to have you here tonight. It is 10 o'clock here in the Midwest, in the central United States. It is 11 o'clock out east, and of course about 8 o'clock in the west, on the west coast. So good to have you all here. What does Sarah say? Oi, no stealing my skitch, my shtick, sorry. I'm sorry, I forgot what day it was. It's Monday, field guy. Did I hear tacos? He asked earlier. Like real tacos, says Steph. Let's see, what are you all talking about over there with tacos? We just had Chipotle, or as everybody around here likes to call it, Chipotle, yesterday. So, how you doing, Sarah?
Hey, Scotty.
What's going on?
Just hanging out. I'm trying to get some people to come in, but they just want to hang back. So
I just want to hang back. I hear you. Not today. Just going to go sit in my corner today and listen, says Kalina. Come on. It's so easy. It's so easy. You don't even have to appear on screen. I mean, look at Sarah. Sarah's just talking. She's got a big pink white S and a big pink circle. So you don't have to show your face if you don't want to. Anybody, if you want to just come and talk, that'd be fantastic. Here's Jason. I know he's kind of bashful.
Well, since you're going to put it that way, Sarah, and just twist arms, nobody.
Yeah, there it is. There it is. I like your sweatshirt.
Thanks.
My son and I got these matching hoodies yesterday.
The
war crime.
It's never a war crime the first time.
Nice.
There's a guy I follow. He's an Army vet. I think he was a medic. Now he's an electrician on the outside. And called The Fat Electrician is the name of his channel. And he pulls all these moments from history, like military history. And it doesn't matter like if it's American or whatever. It can be just military history in general. Things that are absolutely just crazy. And then he covers them. And he has a very, very funny way of doing it. And I also slightly hate him because that's how I would love to teach history.
Yeah.
Because it's enough to get people like, hold on, wait, what?
What? Yeah.
Then they run off and they research it and they get the rest of it, so you get entertained, you get a good
I
laugh,
think
you get
that's a
mind
great
blown.
way to teach history. If you can find a hook in historical events,
Exactly.
a hook that gets people, like one of my history teachers, and I mentioned this before. I don't remember the name of the ruler, though. It was an aside that he gave us, but he was talking about ancient history, and he was talking about so-and-so poisoned so-and-so. And he goes, that's kind of like King, I don't know, it was Shalmaneser the Fourth or whatever he was. He said he was so afraid of being poisoned, he said that he would drink little bits of poison in his goblet. And finally he says, after 20 years, he was drinking goblets of this stuff. And he says, so then he was besieged by, I don't know who was besieging who. And he says, but he tried to poison himself. And of course, couldn't do it.
He
And
built
says,
tolerance. That's great.
He had to stab himself to kill himself, which he hated even more than the thought of poisoning. And it was his servant had to help him kill himself. And so, but you find a hook like that, you go, let's talk about that war. Let's talk about that siege.
Well, and it's, it's also in delivery.
Yes.
I highly recommend you go look this guy up. The Fat Electrician.
I'll write that down. Fat Electrician.
He has all kinds of great stuff. There's one of the ones that I love where he started off. Well, how he started off was basically doing small, like TikTok length clips, right? Maybe a little bit longer than that, where it would just be. He would talk about a particular MOS, right? A particular job, particular career field, Doc, the unit medic, right? And like nobody messes with Doc, and you want to get a bunch of grunts on your ass quicker than anything else. Go after Doc, because that's when the war crimes start. It's these little, started off as these little bits, and his humor and his style, his delivery style was so loved by people that he started doing longer and longer segments. And like he delivers things like there's one where he's talking about the battleship Texas, and he's talking about how, I think it had 14-inch guns, and the rounds were about 2,000 pounds apiece, right? Wow. And that's just the projectile. I'm not talking about all the powder loaded behind it. Mm-hmm. And so he'd be like, that's the equivalent of a car, right? So he kind of frames it in that way to give some perspective in there too, but in a humorous fashion. And he talks about D-Day, and the battleship Texas was at D-Day delivering ship-to-shore artillery, and he's like, so within half an hour, the USS Texas had expended X number of rounds, and it's like the battleship Texas fired the equivalent of a parking lot, a used car lot full of spicy Volvos within. And so he talks in that fashion. And it gets you chuckling, but then it's like, it's that humor tie-in, right? That triggers that stuff, and then people remember it.
I've mentioned there's a man I like him a lot. He's a nice man. He was a horrid history teacher when I was in high school. He was a mathematician, and they needed him to double up in this small private school, so he taught history.
Yeah,
and he stood with his foot on a chair, standing, and leaning an elbow with the book. And he would literally read us the book.
Oh, God.
And we had to take notes. And there will be a test on Friday.
Yeah.
And there was no
no discussion.
The man had no delivery, no what's the word I'm looking for? Energy to his voice.
Yeah.
And I like him a lot. I bumped into him many years after high school, almost 30 years later. And he was at an event where we were doing the Redcoats. And I recognized him. And I went, I called him by his first name. I didn't even call him Mr. So-and-so. I said, Mark. And And he looks at me for a second and he goes, Scotty Roberts. And I go, and but he made history. I hate to say it, he made history not fun, and he made history boring. But I knew teachers, but in his own, to his own credit, it wasn't his thing either.
Right.
He was teaching what I'm assuming he wasn't schooled to do or excited about.
Well, and I think one of the great things about how Nick, the fat electrician, has found this way to deliver things that gets people listening and watching and interesting is that, you know, it breaks down that barrier of, oh God, I hate history for some people.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things that it's like, there are so many people that I run into who are like, I never liked history. It's old and it's boring. And I'm like, that's just because you didn't have a good history teacher.
Didn't have a good history teacher.
And, you know, and the sad thing is like, I think we're seeing a lot more people having that kind of attitude and not caring what's going on. But if you look at the world today and where we're at, all you got to do is read 50, 70, 100 years in the past. And you can see how these things all lead, you know, start the trajectory to where we're at now. And it's like, look, if we don't do things like this back here, which kicked this all off, we're not doomed to repeat this cycle, which is exactly where we're going right.
It's interesting. I had mentioned before that my now 12-year-old last year had asked questions about the Holocaust. And her first big question about it was, Dad, how long ago was that? And I said, well, my grandfather fought in that war. I said, sweetie, I was born only 15 years after the end of that war. That's how recent it was. Yeah. And she said, her eyes got real wide, and she didn't know much about it yet. But she said, do you mean to tell me that could that happen again today? People like nowadays? I said, oh, yeah. And just the other day it came up. We were all out driving around. We were going somewhere, and we were talking about movies to watch. And I brought up Schindler's List. I said, one of these days we're gonna watch that. I said, because I'd like you to see it from that perspective. I don't even want to watch it. She said, I don't want to watch it. I don't want to watch it. I said, it's okay. You don't have to if you don't want to. I said, but you asked me a year ago if that could happen today. I says, look at the reaction in our country. Look at the anti-Semitism that is rising in our country so quickly over the Palestine issue, the October 7th, or whatever perspective you're coming at. I said, I've never seen so much anti-Semitism before. Mm-hmm. And I said, so when you see this, ask me again if you think this could happen again today. You put the right pressure points on, and you get the right people in power, and you get the right people supporting them. Yeah, it could happen.
Well, and the scary thing kind of becomes with that, and I'm not in my reference. I'm not referencing the the current crisis in with the Israel-Palestine issue, but I am using my own kids and their approach to things and what they consume as an example. There's been several times where I've had my kids out for the summer, and we're all just hanging out because we have nothing going on, nothing planned. And so we are, we're watching, they like to watch YouTube shows and YouTube channels and things like that. And you look at some of the stuff that they're watching and what is being said, how it's being said on some of the topics. And if I have any sort of oppositional, or not even necessarily oppositional, but just a different perspective to chime in with, it's immediate, like, attack. Like, you're attacking their whole way of looking at life, and
Right.
you're no, you're wrong because here's why. Da, da, da. It's like, no, hold on, wait a minute. You got to take and look at these perspectives of these things, and you can't. Okay, I say you can't. Obviously, you can, and you're wrong for doing so. If you actually want to get real perspective and a real understanding, but you can't judge historical figures and their actions through the current day lens of society to determine whether they were a horrible person or they were a great person, they were ineffectual, they were very effectual, whatever. I mean, certain things will hold up to that scrutiny. Hitler, Stalin, Mussolini, Mao Zedong, all of those individuals hold up to that sort of scrutiny because they were bad then, they were horrible then, they're bad now. And in some ways we figure out they're even worse, than they were, than we realize. But you have to look at things through the lens of that day to understand, and to even bring that up in general conversation with people can be very hot button, because especially when you're looking at things within the states, you're looking at race, you're looking at the politics, the Civil War, things like that, right? You start to bring in any kind of other perspective and try to say, like, hold on, let's examine this through the lens of that day. To look back on it now, we know all the rights and the wrongs. Right. We know what direction history went. We know all of the facts because we've, papers and books ad nauseum about it, as well as firsthand accounts, as well as archaeological investigation, all these things. We have a body of evidence that supports something, but you have to also look at it from in that day. And there were people who, maybe didn't make the most awesome decision, right, in terms of what would ultimately become with history, through the passage of history into modern day. But at that time, with the information that they had, with the opinions and beliefs of society as a whole in that day, they made this decision, and this was probably the best decision that could be made. And in a lot of ways, it may have been very progressive for that day. Sure. So you have to look at the whole picture, and you have to, after you examine through the modern lens, you also have to look through the historical lens, and then you have to balance the two out. Yes. And people seem to have, with the instant gratification, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, quick blips, right? You can't get all of that. And that has eroded that capability within society, I would say, as a whole, has eroded. And so now it's just a select few of us. And look, I'm not saying I'm amazing at it or anything like that, but at least I try. I get it. I think that's worth. It's very scary, and that's one of the reasons why you see what we're dealing with today, in terms of going down similar paths, because nobody looks at all of the history, nobody considers all of the things. You talk with people on the other side of the political fence, and you bring up LBJ and the programs that he brought in. If you want to look at the recent events here in the U.S. Well, I could just look at you. I could say one word that is a great illustration of what you're saying. I could look at you for what you're saying and go, fascist. Right. Yeah. Exactly. That one word and the way it's used nowadays it tells a whole lot about what people know about it. The more you use a word and you use it to incorrectly label something, the less value it has. It's just like printing money on a fiat system. The more you print it, the less value it has. It's like I've said many times, if everything is racist, nothing is racist. It's the same way with any word you want to plug in there historically. Yeah. And it's just sad to watch that when we were going through all the stuff with BLM and all of those things. And I'm not saying that there wasn't any sort of a an argument to be made, or for people to be mad about, there certainly are things out there that got captured under that umbrella.
Yeah.
Is it as prevalent as people say? I have my doubts. I have my questions. We could probably debate about it. But a lot of the social issues that got really brought to light, a lot of those things started under LBJ.
Yes.
Lyndon Baines Johnson with the Great Society stuff. A lot of things, came up under that. And I mean, heck, Reagan even mentioned some of it, not so subtly, but yet subtly, in that way that he did, in his Goldwater speech, which I reference all the time because of the ridiculous amount of relevancy that it has today. And if you want to see, if you want to see a perfect example of history starting to repeat itself, go watch the Reagan Goldwater speech. Some people call it the Time for Choosing. But if you do a search on Google for Time for Choosing, you don't always get the entirety of the speech, which is about a half hour, but totally worth it. And
Absolutely.
it doesn't feel like a half hour to listen to it. But there are so many parallels. Like, you listen to some of the stuff and you're like, hold on, wait a minute. All this farm stuff that he's talking about, that shit's going on today.
Yeah.
And I'm aware of that because I live in an agrarian community. Grand Forks is very much a farm community, even though we have all kinds of tech coming in with unmanned aerial systems and drones and all kinds of different things like that, and whatnot. It's still very agrarian based mentality.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good. But yeah, I mean, I remember listening to the whole speech while I was out working on the car in the garage one night. Yes, sometimes I do that. Instead of listening to music. But I remember sitting there, I'm wrenching on the Volkswagen, and I'm like, I literally had to physically turn and look at the speaker and head unit because I was Bluetoothing into it. I was like, holy shit.
Yeah. Sometimes I leave the TV playing at night to, I like to have white noise or something. And sometimes I'll be watching some news shows and I lay down and I go to sleep.
Yeah.
And I wake up in the middle of the night and it's got like an old Reagan speech is playing, or a Trump campaign speech from 7 years ago, things like that. And it's like, wow, what's that? But the words will catch me and wake me up sometimes. And I'm like,
right.
What am I listening
like, what?
But Reagan was, I used to, as I said, I used to make breakfast for my older kids when they were little.
Mm-hmm.
They were in middle school, and I used to play in the mornings. I would sometimes just turn on, hey, you got to hear this. This is a president that was president when I was in my 20s, Ronald Reagan. And I said, listen to what he has to say here. We would play like the humor of Ronald Reagan, some of those things. And this is 20 years ago I was playing this stuff for them.
Right.
So it was pretty cool. There's some pretty neat stuff that he talks about. So.
And there's a lot of just applicable stuff because it's things that are very much about the nature of things, about how society works. Like there are certain things that it's just seem to not change. Like they're always constants.
Let me just say, DMI, we covered that show, that topic in the first hour of the show. So we're in the kind of the post show now. If you've never been here before, DMI, but we might hit it up again here in the next half hour if it comes up. But thanks for stopping by. We did the first hour of the show was all on that. Can you possibly die of a broken heart? And you know what? The way I look at it, there's no such thing as coincidence. If there's anything that led you here to hear that, and it's coincidental, quote unquote, with what's going on in your life now, you can hear the archive of this show right here on YouTube. Once we're done here, it'll start archiving, I think right away, if I'm not mistaken. Otherwise, it has to propagate over. I don't know. Does anybody know? Do these shows pick up right away when we're done broadcasting and you can listen to the replay? Or is it, I think the chat room doesn't replay right away. That'll replay by tomorrow sometime. So thanks for stopping in, though. Don't go away because we're not on that specific topic at the moment. But
it wanders in the cabin.
It wanders, yes. The radio show goes till the top of the hour. Then we go into the captain's cabin, the after show, and it can go all over the place if we're not careful. So, yes,
even if we are careful,
says Professor Bauer, who also happens to be in the wings. Should we bring him in?
Look out! Well, hold on, wait a minute. Sarah, you got anything to say? You've been off.
Yeah, Sarah, you're still sitting there, and you're not adding anything. Wondering how you're doing.
Oh, I'm just sitting here dying from a broken heart.
Because we left you out.
Don't die.
No,
We're leaving you out.
It's not that serious.
I will say this, and this isn't a dig of any kind or anything like that, because I don't see your face. It's your face isn't right away in my mind. I have to look at the pink dots there. That's Sarah.
Well, I mean, it's interesting, because we went on a little bit of a tangent, but not really, because it's like,
Sure.
Jason was saying earlier about Jason. What he was saying earlier, it sort of, also applies to what he was saying about relationships. What happens when you reach a point where a relationship or government or whatever no longer serves your needs, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, and you wonder how much energy you're willing to put into the broken system. So, and then
isn't that a fitting parallel? So I'm echoing somewhere. Am I echoing here?
You're gonna have to say that one again, Sarah. My stuff froze up on me.
She made perfect sense if you guys were
Yeah.
paying attention.
Well, I just commented on it. Of course I was paying attention.
And I would add to that I've submitted my letter of separation to both the IRS and the government. I've told them that I'm no longer interested in having a relationship with either one of them because they have failed my expectations, which were set by them on purpose. So I think.
Are you going to be a quiet quitter?
No, I was quite vocal. I wrote it all in bold and all caps. So
bold and all caps. That always works.
So now you're just waiting for the eviction letter. Saying, get out of my house.
Yeah. And I would have joined sooner, but I was on a Spaces with Elon Musk talking about AI and the X platform and all that good stuff.
Please.
So relationships are a one-way trip. And so this is you were asking for potentially different perspectives.
Yeah.
The relationship of anything that you have starts with you. And if you don't have a relationship with yourself, then having a relationship with another entity, be it a carbon-based meat sack or a government entity or an association, institution, or whatever.
Or my doll Lily over there.
Yeah, it's all going to be subjective. It's all going to be subjective and subjected to your relationship with yourself. So broken hearts, to me, that's just another linguistic faux pas. A broken heart is not something that you actually have. It's an emotion that you experience. So you have to really think about what it is, the terms you're using to describe the experience you're having. And as you guys know all too well, I have multiple rants on subjects like this.
Faulty brain synapse.
Depends which button we push.
That's not as romantic as saying it's a broken heart. So, honey, what happened to you? You broke my heart. No, actually, it's a synopsis of your brain firing that, and it's blah
Well,
blah blah
it's
blah
a
blah.
disconnect with
So,
the authenticity and integrity of self.
yes,
And
and that's always worked when somebody's come to me with a broken heart, and I've said, it's a disconnect with yourself.
well,
So,
yeah,
I mean, like,
it doesn't mean that
you-
it's not real. It just means that they can't hear what you're saying because they're
Right.
involved and enveloped in their own
Yes.
perspective psychologically. What do you
And
think
see,
of that,
but
Sarah?
you're a guy like I am. This is the way we would talk to our wives about, anything that comes down. Well, honey, you don't have to be so emotionally driven by that. All that emotion is, it's just emotion. It's not really the fact of the matter. You need to disconnect from the emotional side and get in touch with your Spock, your inner Spock. You need to logic.
And then people wonder why women live longer.
Scotty,
Yeah,
I gotta tell you, I gotta stop you right there because
Stop me.
never in the history of calming down has anyone ever calmed down from being told to calm down.
That's right.
Cue
Lighten
the
up.
Sarah McLachlan music and the gravestone that says Scotty Roberts with the birth and death date. Or
Yes.
anyone who tries to go into an argument or a discussion with logic.
Yes.
It blows up in your face. I mean,
Well, so the question
JP,
is
you got a little
why.
bit of an echo.
Somebody's got an echo. I don't know where it's coming
yeah,
from.
I don't know if it's me or
Is it you, Prof?
I don't hear any on my side.
No, it's JP.
Yeah, let me exit out and then I'll come back in. Stand by.
So, the whole issue of logic versus logic, reason, critical thinking, all those things have been emaciated from not only, well, and I could go on this rant, but I'll just keep it short. The feminist movement screwed themselves and everybody else. And they did that by trying to take the emotive quality and content of women and provide masculinity to it. They, basically said women are equal to men. It's like, well, it depends on your definition of equal. And that gets into the whole equality thing and equity thing, which is another bunch of mental parasites that have been put into the language and confusing the shit out of people. But when you think about what we're seeing today, we have effeminate men more than we ever have had, and we have masculine women more than we ever had. And neither one of them are to go into the world of woo and just psychology. Neither one of those are a balance of the masculine and feminine energies that we all have. They are completely out of kilter. But that's why you've got more men doing the trans than you've got women doing trans. I just saw a new statistic where out of nowhere, testicular injuries in women's sports have skyrocketed.
well,
I mean,
Amazing,
how did
man.
that happen?
if you put just one testicular injury in there, it skyrockets.
We still have a big echo coming from you. It's not too disturbing yet. It's just echoey. You've got like your God voice on. But
It's like he's at the
my
ball
echoing?
game.
Yep, we can hear the whole broadcast echoing.
All right, stand by. I'll
But
try
it's
again.
a headset thing. I'm sorry, brother.
Do
No,
we
it's
have
okay.
another feminine-based carbon
We
unit?
do. We have
joining here?
Adriana is here. How
Good
you
evening,
doing?
everyone. Hanging in there.
Good to see you.
Thank you. Likewise.
You are the counterpoint to Sarah's pink circle. You are a brown circle
Oh, thank you.
with the white lettering.
Not going to go there.
What's on your mind?
Honestly, I'm not certain because as I was trying to sign in, it blocked me out of the conversation. So I don't know exactly where we're at.
Okay.
Last time I was in, we were talking about history.
That far back.
Yeah.
That's ancient history in this conversation now. We have morphed from that back into the brokenheartedness.
Oh, okay.
But you can bring up the history issue too.
Oh
They're
no,
both
that's
on the
okay.
table.
If we're on a different topic, that's fine.
We're not locked into it. This is the cabin. So,
Understandable.
yes, the topic is a mere guideline. So, not so much rules. Are you there, Jason? Or are you just sitting really still?
He just did a private message about, if
he
the
frozen?
echo was still there, but it looks like he's frozen.
There is an
he's
echo.
back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an echo.
Now it sounds like it's on Scotty.
Does it sound like?
Yeah, I had my.
I'm gonna
I had my
go
mic
mute
on,
and you guys just
or
talk
mute.
for a minute. Let's see what happens.
So
Okay.
Well, and
to
here
bring
we
it
are.
back to topic,
It's-
of actually dying of a broken heart. To me, it lends to the suggestion of evidence of the relationship between mind, body, and spirit. Because we always talk about the psychological aspect of it, the emotional aspect of it. Emotions create chemicals. They affect chemicals in the body. Like you were talking earlier about stressed out hearts. And so, is it possible to die from a broken heart? Sure, from a medical perspective.
How many
Go ahead.
times in the news have we heard where a person dies and then a few hours later their significant other died because of this situation? So
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean it's not just if they both have reached a certain age and the body starts shutting down. I mean that also is possible. I mean you can still rationalize it 50 ways till Sunday, but again it boils down to also a matter of perspective. You
Right.
can rationalize it any way you like. But.
Well, that's I know. Like with Uncle Dave, I'm still hearing an echo. By the way, it's not Jason. So with Uncle Dave, his very elderly mother passed away within a month of. Dave died and his brother died the same day. And then his 95-year-old mother died within a month. Now, I think his dad is still around. He's the same age. He's 95 or 96. But he's holding on. But, those kinds of emotional traumas, when they're that close to home, we hear that all the time. There's JP. Yeah, the echo is still here, guys.
Yeah.
So
Let me try and mute and see if it's me.
Or from Sarah.
I shall
Sarah went
mute
mute,
myself.
and I still hear it. There it is. It's gone. It's coming from you, Professor.
How could it be coming from me when I'm
We have
just?
isolated the problem.
I am. Let's do insulation and see what happens. Is that any better?
Your mic sounds better. I don't hear the echo either.
Well, it's one setting for one show and another setting for another
show. Exactly. It all depends on the system.
Professor creating problems.
That's all I say. Is
Yeah.
gremlins.
There's
What was that, Adriana?
Gremlins.
yeah.
Yes.
So I think the whole idea of dying of a broken heart is an aspect of will, and I think that is something that people can have a sense of whatever the emotion is, and that emotion can take over and control the biological system.
Mm-hmm.
So, I back in the early 90s, I came to the realization that you could change your DNA just with your mind and your thoughts.
Whoa.
So if you have a connection with someone who then passes, then I think that you can create that situation in your mind where your body just says, "Oh, you don't want to live anymore, huh? Well, I'll acquiesce to your request, and off we will go."
Off we will go. So where does consciousness come into that? Is the interesting question. It's
where it all is.
That's where it all is. I know I was very involved with somebody before I met Rainey and after my divorce, and we were involved for about 4 years, and that thing broke up. And I got to tell you, during that period of time, in 2 short months, I dropped about 80 pounds. Now, keep in mind, I'm a big fellow, not massive, but I'm a big guy. And I dropped 80 pounds. But about a month into that, I said, I'm going to take advantage of this heartbreak weight loss, emotive weight loss. And I hopped on my bike, and that's when I started biking 12 miles a day. I tried to pour that energy into something positive. And so I biked 12 miles a day, and I stopped eating shitty food, and I dropped, well, about 80 pounds, because I went from 283 down to roughly 205.
And could you have done that without the disturbance in your relationship?
I could have. That's a possibility. You can be in great spirits all the time and lose 80 pounds and get in good shape. But it was a catalyst. It was something where I realized after a week I hadn't eaten a thing. And
also what Spike can do in that regard.
Yes.
I lost 40 pounds over the course of 4 months when I was in Afghanistan, 18 and 19.
Yep.
I'd gotten out of a relationship with a gal, and we were still friends on Facebook. And I know she had kind of started trying to work out before we'd broken up. And, she posted some article about some guy that went from being like really, really overweight to being basically, a muscle-bound model for men's cologne and fashion and things like that.
I don't like to brag that much.
Right, yeah. And she on the post it said hubba hubba was her comment when she posted it. And I remember just being like, all right, I'll show you, fucker. And it sent me on it was the catalyst to, I started eating a more keto-centric diet. I was doing, an hour and a half to hour and 45 minutes in the gym every day. And, I lost 40 pounds and, in basically 4 months, actually less than that. Cause I didn't really start doing anything until like 2.5 weeks into the deployment. And so, oh yeah, I had to buy all new clothes just to,
I will tell you, I went, like I said, I didn't eat for about a week. And then there was a point in there where I said, well, I have 3 kids at home, so I better start eating. I got to keep healthy. And I did pick up my smoking picked up. And that was a catalyst, or not a catalyst, a surrogate. Mm-hmm. And my alcohol consumption peaked and valleyed. And but when I started eating again, I started eating things like raw honey and rice cakes were my primary. That's what I remember being my primary diet: raw honey and rice cakes. And I'd every now and then take chicken breasts and saute them in Worcestershire sauce and tomatoes. And that is all I remember eating. I remember my doc, I had diabetes back then. And my doc said, if I didn't know you had diabetes, I wouldn't know you had diabetes by my blood sugars and my A1C and all of that. Because, you eat like that for 2 months and you exercise vigorously every day, and I would not miss a day. Maybe there was some spite in that too. Yeah, well, I'll show you. I'll show you how
Yeah.
hot you can become. And because this particular woman, I'm not even going to get into it. The people that she dated after that were all. So anyway, suffice it to say, I did it every day. I exercised every day. I would be damned if rain was going to keep me from biking 12 miles today or anything. And I did it. I didn't, of course, bike in the snow, but it was all April, May, June, July, August was when I was doing all that exercise. And I got to tell you, it worked wonders, but it started as an emotional response. That I said, I'm going to take this emotional response and see if I can use it to benefit anything. It didn't take away the heartache at all, but I can tell you what, the dopamine sure helped. The physical activity sure helped.
Yep.
I had no shortage of young women that wanted to let me cry on their shoulders. That part of it worked, but I wasn't looking for it at the time. So,
Right.
But there you go, emotional response, taking it into physical response. Ladies, what do you think? Adriana, Sarah, what do you guys think of that? All that? Have you had experiences like that where you find that the emotional spills over into the physical?
Adriana, you can go first.
I'm thinking. I've been
Comment loading.
I've been married for 24 years, so it's like I gotta think that far back.
Well, I mean, it's just, goes to show the resiliency of human beings that, after experiencing a traumatic experience, which, in this case, it's an emotional trauma experience. What we do after is what is important, right? You got up and you got mad or, and you did what you needed to do or jealous or whatever motivated you. And ultimately, even though those, initially those emotions are not considered, they're healthy, but they're not considered ideal, because everybody wants to feel better.
Yep.
And my heart wasn't physically breaking, literally, but my actions, my emotions would have taken me there,
right?
If I had allowed them to, and so I had to put the stop on it.
Well, and you ultimately you reach a point where you either hit bottom or you reach a point where you said, okay, I have to make a choice here. Do I choose to not get out of bed today? Do I choose, to get up and do something about it, or not think about it, or just trying to let it sit, or focus on my energy in other directions. And then you reach a point where it's like, okay, being in this behavior, this emotional state, it's not serving you, it's not serving me. Right. Mm-hmm. Or not serving me. So
and that's the rational
do about it, because we have limited time on this earth. We have limited energy. We need to allocate our resources appropriately.
And that's the rational response that we should have in those things. But that isn't always what hits us first, most definitely. That's the response that comes if we allow our thinking to take over and say, and I think this is where, I mentioned many times, talk about that whole balance we have to keep between logic and emotion. And I think that there is, sometimes we have to Spock it, and sometimes we have to, bones it, so to speak. And, you've got to take a balance between the two, and you've got to let, for me, I didn't necessarily want to be in that state. I didn't want to be groveling at my own feet in emotional heartbreak. Yeah. But neither did I want to do anything. It was like I was lucky I had my kids at that time. I had sole custody of 3 kids. Yeah. And I was the sole parent. So I had to be there and on on the moment every day. And I was, but there were days I couldn't wait for them to go to school. I just could fucking go to school because I don't want to have to deal with anybody right now. And I think I went through 3 cell phones at that time. And that's when cell phones were, well, they were in their infancy a little bit.
Still expensive, but,
early 2000s. But I broke a few of them, throwing a phone across the wall, across the room into the wall. And or drinking almost an entire bottle of single malt Highland Scotch, and it being
now you're talking.
There it is, brother. And so,
I mean, also, to tie it earlier with what JP was saying, about perspectives in history. It's the same thing. You have the decisions that you make in the moment at that time with whatever information that you have on hand, because you don't have all the information. And then you have that alternate perspective of looking back, the retrospective of looking back, and you said, oh, now I have this other information and apply it to that situation. And, you said, I could have done that differently.
Mm-hmm. And I know right now that's like an issue with school now. I mean, I have a kid in high school, and fortunately he loves history, but it's like I have to, when he comes home, it's like I ask him, so what did you learn? Because I don't want him to be given misinformation, because now the way history is, as I mentioned in the comment before, is you are having armchair historians, and they're looking at everything in history through the eyes of a person living now. They're not taking into consideration what it was like back then.
Right.
A lot of things happened, a lot of atrocities happened and everything, but you got to look at it from that perspective as to when it happened and not now, and reverting or looking back to that time.
Mm-hmm. Now I think that we have much less excuse for doing things they did 85 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and that's one of the great things about where we're at, is that we have so much to learn from. We have so many lessons from the mistakes and the successes. All we have to do is apply them, and it does take a lot of examination of things.
But people aren't willing to examine. They just want to listen to what someone says, and they don't question whether or not somebody what they're saying is
there's a lot of
or. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say that you're right, and there's a lot of things too that if you look through history, right, and I know I'm going to get flack for this somewhere, I am sure, but I base this off of a conversation with a good friend of mine who was a tribe member in one of the eastern tribes, the 5 civilized tribes, as they would call them back in the day.
The civilized tribes, yes.
Yeah. There is a lot of stuff, if you look back during the period that often gets referred to as like the Indian Wars and things like that, where you have a lot of treaty breaking. But the thing is it happens on both sides.
Yes, it does.
But a lot of people don't want to look at the native side of it and where they went wrong. It's all where the government went wrong. And I am not going to defend any of the times where the government went wrong, right? It went wrong. Whether it was the government itself just going back on something because of whatever, or it was the government not applying the right kind of corrective measures when one of the citizens, one of the settlers, did something that was a violation of. And but the thing is you got to look at all sides of it. I mean, I remember in a conversation came up after watching a comment thread that from him that he was involved in pop up in my Facebook feed. And, you know, he lit, and I can't list all of them. I can't remember. This was years ago that we had the conversations. But, you know, he listed multiple instances through history where a bad actor from a tribe rallied up some people and they broke the treaty. It was straight up on them, and everything was sitting there spelled out in black and white. Hey, look, if you do this, you basically make this null and void, and we take this territory back. Got it? Okay. And then, you know, Bob, 6 miles over, gets riled up about something and gets his buddies riled up about something. And then next thing you know, you've kicked off another conflict and you've killed a treaty.
Right.
And that's the thing, though, is there's also a lack of willingness to examine the fact that it may not be the entirety of something. It could be a small section of it, you know, a couple of bad apples ruining the whole bushel. And people don't like to look at that. It gets very, very uncomfortable to look at that. Like, look, I am a veteran. I've been in our two major, you know, current, you're not current technically anymore, most recent wars. I'm a diehard staunch supporter of the military in America and things like that. But like, you know, there's look back through history and it's like, you know, it's really uncomfortable to read about some people from the previous generations who did some really bad things under our flag and wearing my uniform.
Well, the point you're making, Jason, is that somebody's sensibilities become triggered and or offended. And sensibilities are nothing more than emotions that are out of control and unchecked. So, you know, to Scotty's point about you either spock it or you bone it, there's a reason that is an excellent analogy. Anytime emotions are involved that generate, that are the focus of your energy to go do whatever it is that you're going to do, you're not going to end up in a good place at all. Emotions are not your friend. Emotions are the things that you need to cherish and experience and embrace. But they're the first things that you put on the shelf. When Jason, for example, you go to war, you're in the military, your emotions don't matter. It's the mission, it's the methods, it's all of the machinery and everything else that matters. You don't let emotions get in the way of trying to achieve taking the mountain and accomplishing the mission.
Yeah, you
do your best to not let it. And there's a certain, and depending on what you're doing, there's a certain amount of you need the emotionality. But last 20 years we fought coin, right? So counterinsurgency, and you know that's a hearts and minds game. So you have to be able to unshelf the emotions a little bit to be able to sit down in a shura with a village elder and his council of people and have an empathetic connection.
Yeah, but that's a strategy call. And to our Adriana's point, if you are not self-examining, this goes back to Sun Tzu's Art of War. Okay,
Which
one of the
thy enemy as thyself.
Well, it's never interrupt your opponent when they're in the middle of making a mistake.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Why do you think I'm always quiet?
Hey, shut up over there. Not too much.
I see the S doesn't stand for Sarah. It stands for Sun Tzu.
That's it.
But, I mean,
I'm from the school of
get off on
another
tangent, because I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum of what he's saying, because if that was true, why do we have such high rates of PTSD for military coming home?
That's compartmentalization of things.
Yeah.
and not dealing with stuff appropriately. Plus, you look at, you don't always have the opportunity, and like you see, so we'll have to go back a little bit, but the majority of your 22 a day.
We're already overtime, so go ahead.
So you hear that common thing, 22 a day. Don't become part of the statistic. Veterans talking to other veterans. So the majority right now of the 22 a day who are actually part of that suicide statistic are Vietnam vets, and they never really got or had access to the kinds of care and things that allow them to deal with those emotions that they're having to unbox. So you have to be able to compartmentalize to do your job, but you also have to be able to have a safe and stable environment free from judgment to be able to unbox that and get that out and appropriately deal with it. And I personally, and I know there's some people who would back me up on this in conversations that I've had with professionals. But if you look at how things were done mid to late Vietnam compared to today, mid to late Vietnam, all those units are in place over there, and they're rotating people out one at a time. Everybody has a different rotation home date. You have 4 or 5 guys that may have the same thing because they came on the same plane, got to the unit at the same time, but you're shipping out, and these, replacements just came in onesies and twosies and left. And when they left, they weren't with those people that they built that bond with, that created that safe place and familiar place of support. And then today we deploy as a unit, we come back as a unit. And so you are surrounded by the people that you went to war with, so you can commiserate with or complain with or celebrate or cry with people who have similar experiences. They were there with you. They know what's going on. And so there's kind of a support network built into it. So it's,
I mean, essentially, if you're in a unit, you're building a family,
right.
type of connection.
You start that with day one in basic. They tear you down, and then to where you feel like nothing, and then they build you up as a team, as a family. I think part of the issue is that they do that in the beginning, but when someone's discharged, or at least from the experience that I've had with my friends that are vets, they don't do anything to try to, I guess you can say, deprogram them to, decompress, to help them out once they get out of the military and into the civilian world.
And they do, believe me, even since I got out in 15, and even towards the end of my time in, they were making changes and trying to implement things to help deal with that stuff. Now, are they perfect systems? No. I could bash the TAP program all day long, or a Soldier for Life program, as they call it now. It used to be it wasn't transition assistance program. Maybe it was transition assistance program, but where they'd go in and they'd teach you how to write a resume, and they'd help you practice interviews, and they'd help you do things, but like it was kind of in its infancy, if you will, when I went through it.
Right.
And so things have changed a lot, and there's still a lot of problems with it. I see it today. Go ahead.
I was sorry. From the experience that I've had, it was after Desert Storm Part 1.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how things are now, but during that time, at least the impression that I had was that they really didn't have anything at that time.
And back then they didn't. And that was still carryover from, way back when. They kind of stuck with the same model and kept rolling it forward. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And then we get into, heavy duty coin operations for 20 years, and people are like, oh God, it is broke. Jesus, how did we let it get this bad?
Desert
And
Storm,
they're-
just for context for me, Desert Storm started in 91, was it? And when
Yeah.
did it end?
If I'm not mistaken.
92, it's a 100-day war. So whatever Desert Shield is, and then add on Desert Storm, the 100 days.
And
It's
then the
100 days,
cleanup
100 hours.
after.
100, yeah.
All right.
The cleanup after, yeah.
Well, I need to go do some other things, so I'll leave you guys with this.
Well, we're about ready to wrap anyway. Professor, thanks for being here. As
You're not
always.
allowed to leave. You're
Yeah,
stuck.
well, I'm going to make a rare exception to my usual
Check out
hanging on, and I'm going to leave you with this. In the school of life, it gives you the test first and the lesson afterwards. So you might want to keep that in mind. And most importantly, for those of us that are absolutely tired of the winter, we are 30 days away from spring today.
How about that?
So
Bada
wrap that around
a rough winter.
your whatever.
A rough, warm winter.
It's been weird. It's been so weird up here. I'm
Yeah.
terrified of what's going to come next. Like I
Yeah, I
We're
am
in the 50s today, and that's in Illinois.
right. It's supposed
It is.
to get up to the 50s sometime end of next week,
Same here.
beginning
Well,
of the following week.
we always get here in the Minneapolis, St. Paul to western Wisconsin, where I am, just a half hour east. We always get, your Dakota weather the next day or two. And so we get that horrid plains winter, bitter winter from you guys, and it comes rolling in here. But we've had this weird Arctic flow or southern flow, if you will, this year. And we've had our first substantial snowfall here in the Minnesota, Wisconsin area was last Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
we hadn't had any snow but a dusting since October. We had a dusting and no snowfall until Saturday. And we had 4 to 5 inches. But then it was gone. It's almost all gone now because we're back up in the 40s, going to the 50s.
Well,
And
I'm
I'd
in the
just like to
global
apologize.
warming camp, and I say bring on the global warming.
I'm all
Because
for it. I like the
nothing
the weather.
survives and thrives more in warm weather than anything else. The cold kills life, and it kills brain cells, and it creates cabin fever and all that other crap that
See,
it does to you. So
That's
it's
why
just
my
not a
wife-
good
It
thing.
also kills mosquitoes.
Yeah, it
just so
does.
You know. You have a
Yeah,
really
that's
harsh
true.
winter, you have less mosquitoes, which is nice.
Yeah. There's no
Yeah.
mosquitoes. We haven't had any mosquitoes since September. But my wife doesn't want to move south because she said there's alligators, snakes, scorpions, and things that will eat you. I said bears and coyotes will eat you. She said, yeah, but
Wolves.
wolves. Yeah, that's what I meant.
All kinds of
Actually,
stuff.
there are a few packs over by you, aren't there, Scotty?
Yeah, there are in Wisconsin. There are bears here. We had a bear run through our front yard a few years ago. We were on the T. Our house was at the T of a street. We were up at the top, and my driveway would just go right out into the street, or you could go right or left. And I was in the garage, and my kids were out playing in the yard. This had to be, 8 years ago. So they were little kids. And we had a woman that came over. There was a friend of the family that was doing maid work for her. She came over to clean the house.
Mhm.
She's got her head stuffed in her car trunk out on the street. And out of the corner of my eye, I think I see my neighbor's big German Shepherd, a big, fluffy, fat German Shepherd. And I turned to look, and that was no German Shepherd. It was a little further away. It was a bear. That bear had to be 400 or 500 pounds, loping down the street right to my driveway. And I caught him out of the corner of my eye as he was turning in front of behind the car where the woman that was doing our stuff, she's bent over in the car. He must have, I'd be surprised if his hot breath didn't catch her legs as he rounded around her car, went through our yard to the backyard, and then off into the fields that are way back there. And I remember I saw him and I went, bear! And I was going to bring him up earlier in the program, but my friend across the street is an Iraqi war vet, and just a little bit older than you, JP. And he was out the door in moments, and he had guns. I mean, rifles or something. I didn't even see what he had. Almost on each hip, and like a bandolero of shells. And he's like, where? And he's running out, and PTSD. He has PTSD. Good man, great neighbor, but you don't go boom around him too much. And,
imagine how confused that bear was.
What's that?
Can you imagine how confused that bear must have been?
Oh my God! And the bear didn't want to have anything to do with us.
What am I doing?
I'm just passing through. I'm just running here. It's a straight shot to the field, okay? And we called the police, and they said, "Oh, that's probably the mama bear from down on the river flats." Oh, you know of this bear? Oh, she does at least twice every spring. She comes out through the neighborhoods. So, so just stay out of her way. They haven't had any mishaps with her, so.
Well, I was talking to a friend up in BC and in Edmonton earlier today, and the bears are already out of hibernation up there, and they're confused.
And confused.
Because they've had literally no snow up there.
Wow.
Right. We slept too long.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but that's one of the advantages of being down here in the Southwest. We have no mosquitoes. We've got some snakes only out if you go out in the climbing around the rocks, but there's none in town. We don't have alligators. We don't have scorpions. We don't have rats and mice. The only thing we have is for 1 month a year in August, the flies come out. And fortunately, they're not the horse flies or the things that are in the Midwest or down in the Southeast, which will pick you up. And the mosquitoes, too. They're the size of B-52s. They pick you up, drop you off into their pad, and come back and feed on you. We don't have any of that down here. And the only thing we have is that, a month or two of scorching hot weather. And it's like, well, I got a remedy for that. It's called air conditioning. I'm good.
There you go.
Good swap.
I was in Texas for a month a few years ago, and I was sitting by the pool with my laptop, and I saw something white crawling up the side of my laptop. And I thought it was a little, I thought, what kind of bug is that? And I looked, and it's a scorpion. It's a little transparent scorpion. I just went, and I stood up real quick, and I went, I'm not sitting in a nest or anything, am I? And so, yeah, not my favorite thing. Anyway.
Well, I'm out of here, folks. Have a great evening. And
that's for you too.
Start your countdown to spring. It starts at 30, and each day just tick one off.
There it is.
The next thing you know, it's going to be warmer and wetter, but at least the sun will be out.
There it is.
If you have a proclivity to run around naked, that's when you can start your runs.
There it is. Start your engines.
Now we scared Adriana off.
Sorry, Adriana. I didn't
we'll see you
mean
later.
to do that.
No, it takes a lot more to scare me than that.
Thanks for being here, Professor.
All right, everybody. Take care.
Later.
Night.
Adriana, thank you for
Yes, sir.
coming in.
Mhm.
And make it more often.
I'm trying. I know when we were talking about resolutions, my resolution this year is 2024 is the year of me. So I need to be taking care of myself rather than everybody else. So,
There it is.
so yeah, it's been rough, but I'm one day at a time is my mantra. So
I understand that.
yeah. So everybody have a good night.
You too, and thank you for being here, and come back in here again. Not just
I will. I promise.
All right, we'll see you later. And Sarah, thanks for being here.
All right,
As
thanks,
always.
guys.
It's always good having you here. I love hearing your voice. We're still going to work on breaking you down. We got to see your face one of these days.
Well, I had this whole thing I was going to say at the end. Now it just went out of my head. So thanks for that.
Sorry about that.
I don't know. I had something about healing broken hearts, and now it's just gone. So
the thing is gone.
It happens.
We get the spirit of it. We catch it.
Yeah, sure.
So.
All right, thanks, guys. Take care.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks,
See you.
Rob.
All right, brother Jason. Good to see you.
Good seeing you as always.
And yes, it is. I know.
Such a humble man.
So humble. So humble.
I can only hope to be as humble of a fellow as you are.
I can only hope for you that as you get older, you will learn to be as wise, as humble as I. By the way, speaking of getting older, I watched, my wife did not see it with me. I watched Picard, Star Trek Picard, season 3. I watched the first episode of it last night with Rainey sitting there, said, you got to watch this. Just watch.
Yeah.
She wanted to see it. She grew up on Next Gen.
Right.
And I had seen it already. And I watched that first episode and it was like, it was fresh. It was like, oh, this is so good revisiting this. And so many quarters had said that season 3 of Picard was the finest season of Star Trek ever filmed since the original. And
Yeah.
there was a lot of people that said that. There were lots of good
really
episodes,
good.
but the whole season was absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
And it confirmed that for me last night, just watching one episode. But I thought of, I think of the way we sit here and talk sometimes. And I was watching, I love the way Jonathan Frakes, Riker, directs, because he directed, I think, most of the third season, if not all of it.
Yeah, he did a bunch of directing in just that whole series of Picard.
And I think his hand is all over season 3, even deeper than just directing. And he comes off incredibly. He comes off like one of us sitting around and talking. And it just, there's nothing it's solid I'm actually glomming onto here, just other than that flash of him and the way I think it's probably his personality, Frakes' personality coming out in the character.
Yeah.
And I think some of those best actors, their characters came out in those characters after so many years. So it was refreshing, and that's all I'm going to say about it. There's nothing profound other than to say it made me think of that just a few moments ago. So anyway, do with it whatever you want. All right. You have a good night, brother. And I'll
you too, man.
All right, folks. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being part of this here program. I appreciate you. I'm glad that you take your time and come in and spend it here when you could be doing other things. So have a good night. We'll see you next time. Live long and prosper.